reminds me of the cornfield and the diamond. He built it, they came, coming on a break here. Be back to hear this incredible story of fortitude, determination and guts to tell his story to alive and future audiences throughout all time. Out of time, we'll be right back. Having reached complete and absolute peace of mind was not my goal, it just happened. Up until that time, only a glimpse of it was reached, completely by accident. The glimpse took place as I was reclined on a lawn chair outside of an acquaintance's mobile home near Disney World. I had taken a bike ride from Miami to Orlando, and when I arrived, no one was home. As I sat and waited for someone to arrive, I closed my eyes and began to listen to a single cricket. It became so clear and loud in my mind, as I listened to and heard every vibration. I had listened so intently for a period of time and had no thoughts of my own, that in an instant I became aware of the fact that I could no longer feel my body and that I had indeed not yet a thought of my own. From the moment I decided to actually hear the sounds of the cricket, my entire being was now only the vibrations, which I could see. Realizing I was indeed having an out-of-body experience, fully awake and aware of where I was, a thought crossed my mind: is it possible to get even closer to this sound and not have to return to the physical? And how do I return to my body? I decided to shake my left arm, a strange sensation to say the least. I opened my eyes and sat up, completely dumbfounded over what had just happened. About 3 years later, before remembering this event had ever happened, the reason this event came to memory was because it happened again. Seated in a recliner at home listening to music, the same circumstances and sensations occurred, and at that moment I flashed back to my encounter with the cricket. This realization snapped me out of it instantly, with a head full of thoughts. How did I do this? Could I do this at will, and can I teach others to achieve this state of mind? Quite a surprise to me that I had forgotten all about that cricket, let alone it was a cricket near Disney World, so I decided to take some time and figure out if I could develop a step-by-step way to repeat this sensation. I also wanted to know exactly what part of my body was the last I could feel. Answering all of these questions did make it a little more difficult to return to this state. Your own thoughts do make it difficult to disconnect, but I persisted until the following events took place. Reclined, with the music on, trying to hear every note, I let my body settle to its lowest point, actually feeling dropping sensations and wave after wave, letting my eyes settle to a position which seemed to let them float independent of my senses. Seal the mouth closed, with all air slightly sucked out and with the tongue filling the space behind closed teeth. At this point, making sure my entire body was in a comfortable position without any pulling or extra pressure or tension. This includes folds in the skin as well as hair. At this stage, any readjustment was fine. After several minutes of settling, readjusting and relaxing my nervous system, it was very important to remain awake, being sure to listen and hear every vibration of the music. The goal is to put the body to sleep and awaken the mind. My first attempt to achieve disconnect while recalling all of the steps to do so did make it more difficult, but I persisted, only to realize so many things had to take place in order to do it just right. First, twitches and facial muscles had to be the first to cease. Emotions or reactions to sound must not reflect in the face. Next is the awareness of your entire body as a whole. If you are aware of motion in the nervous system, then concentrate on a part of the body which has completely settled and not moved since the start. Generally, it is the feet, or perhaps a hand, in which you can no longer feel fingers touching fingers. Let this area spread, realizing how much of your body you actually cannot sense, but be aware of the fact that these portions are on their way to spreading. During this phase of the process, continue to hear the music and all of its vibrations, as you take inventory of your physical being. Once comfortable, now feeling or being aware that sound and thought are not located or emanating from the region of the head and face. The sensation is that the entire physical being is the receptor of thought and sound. It seems awareness of thought and sound can be moved anywhere within the confines of your physical being. Perhaps the most difficult task is to not become aware of your breathing and expanding chest. During my first attempt, I tried every breathing pattern, long slow deep breaths, short shallow breaths and any other combination I could think of, until I fell into a rhythm which, to this day I do not know, worked. I simply did not become overly focused on it. Certainly, by this point, you will have become aware of sensations which you've never experienced. Know you are on your way, but never stop listening to and hearing the music, delving ever deeper into all of the separate sounds and vibrations which make it up, and the fact that you are truly hearing them all at once. You might even wonder, why hasn't anyone ever told me about this sooner? Just one hint: if you ever have to swallow, for any reason, before or after reaching this point, stop and try over at a later time. It's an action of the physical which cannot be overcome during an attempt. Then it began to happen, the moment I had been searching for, the moment of disconnection, and the knowledge of which part of my body I would last be connected with. Without warning, the feeling was as though there was a very tight rubber band stretched over the top of my head, behind my ears and under my jaw. This area began to move forward with ever-increasing speed, as though the rubber band were going to slip off the front of my face. That is exactly what happened. When it reached the point that an actual rubber band would have snapped off of my face, it did, but it didn't just snap off. The sensation of it leaving was physical, past and beyond my face. I heard a loud snap, with the intensity of a bullwhip cracking, and saw a brilliant spark at a point just in front of the bridge of my nose. How freaking incredible this was! I had now separated my consciousness from its physical self. I was now only the music I was listening to, if you want to call it that. Listening was not exactly how one in this state would classify it. You have to be there to appreciate it. I was seeing and feeling it in all of its splendor and detail, in detail which would make the virtual reality of today's most sophisticated computers seem like a black and white television showing of the Lone Ranger. I was able to reach this state reclined in a chair or flat on my back, in bed, within 20 minutes. But this ability was only there for a few weeks, because peace of mind had slipped away due to circumstances surrounding me. I was informed that business was slow and my job could not support me full-time, and I would have 2 more weeks to train someone to replace me part-time. During this 2-week period, attempts to return to the higher plane were fruitless. Once I was no longer employed, the realization that I was so incredibly lucky to be 21 years old and living in South Florida at the time. The odds against it were incredible, considering how many people had lived and died before now, and how many people would do the same long after I was gone, and the environments they had a chance of living in. The odds were astronomical. An acceptance of this reality helped ease my mind, so I was going to return to the place I had been before. I had tried every position before this last attempt with no success. So this time I was going to do my best to create the perfect circumstances for success. I spread a sheet on the daybed in the living room, making sure to lay it flat, as well as myself naked. It took a moment or two to make sure there were no wrinkles on the sheet under me, no tugs on my skin or hair. The music was on. Dark Side of the Moon. All was going exceptionally well, step by step, and then it happened. The disconnect was about to take place. The rubber band effect started. But at the moment I expected to hear the snap and see the spark, there was a great flash of brilliant white light instead. Now, instantly, viewing a sheet of the purest brilliant white light I have ever seen, where I knew my body should be, the realization that I was viewing it, not from within, but completely detached from it, did not seem to shock or surprise me. In that instant I truly knew what had been accomplished. I had separated my consciousness from my body and was now viewing my spirit. My point of view was from 45 degrees and slightly above my face and past the top of my head. I knew where my consciousness was and where my spirit was, but I had no sense of where my body actually was. Without hesitation and for some unknown reason I began to think about my left knee. Much to my surprise, black hole or void developed in this sheet of light just where my knee should be. As soon as I stopped thinking about the area of my knee, it immediately shrank and became brilliant again. I seemed to have all of the answers and knowledge surrounding the reason for my existence and the purpose of my life. At that moment, knowing I had somehow tapped into universal knowledge, with this thought I began to shake my left arm. now finding myself sitting up on the edge of the daybed, with a mission and purpose for my life. I got dressed and went for a walk, with only one regret. I was so intent on viewing my spirit, I neglected to look up and around myself to see what was out there, and perhaps seeing who else might be viewing me in this state. Evidently someone had been viewing me in that state, and I did in fact get their attention. It was some 18 years later that I became aware of one of those somebodies. It was mid-afternoon as I was lying on the waterbed at home, in my wife's condominium, face down with my arms under my body and hands palms up against the front of my thighs. I lay there in a completely peaceful and content state of mind. At no point did I fall asleep. My eyes were closed and I had barely gotten comfortable, when I heard a voice coming from one of the guys on duty standing about 3 feet from my head and to my right say, "Get up." I instantaneously considered how. But without wasting a heartbeat or single thought or movement of my body, I raised straight up and above the bed by about 1.5 feet. At the moment I reached this point, the voice said, "Go through the wall." So I did. Still in a horizontal position, I floated straight through the wall, head first. As I passed through the wall, all I can say is it was kind of like watching the Starship Enterprise travel through some sort of warp field or plasma distortion. All in muddy browns and earth tone hues. Once through, I popped out and was flying above grass-covered slopes. This was completely awesome. I had flown in dreams and had out-of-body experiences in the past and knew that I could control my speed and elevation just by thinking about it. But I had never been told to do so. I was flying several yards above the ground, or should I say well-manicured grass of rolling hills and slopes. Off to my left at the tops of one of the rises, I saw what could have been a very large building, dwelling, or even a city. Its size and proportions were not exactly of my concern, but I do remember what it looked like and could draw a design. Even today, some 20 years later, now completely aware of the circumstances I found myself in, I decided to see just what my capabilities were. I flew at varying speeds and heights, higher and fast than I had ever gone before, and with such control, never possible by me before. I decided to accelerate upward and see how high I could fly. At the peak of my flight I saw what appeared to be crystal, silver or shiny orbs. About 3 of them spread just ahead of me and to my right. Then it happened. Well, it is kind of anticlimactic. Music lyrics of an earthly nature popped into my head. Something about crystal ships and starship troopers. And wham, I was back in my body. The best I can figure is because of words and thoughts of this physical world. I was slammed back into my body, to say the least. I was quite impressed and wanted to thank the guy on duty which popped into my bedroom. I would like to warn you, the listener, that, of course, not all the guys on duty are of the positive polarity. No fooling, dough. This brings me to the day them other guys tried to warn me, or just let me know what they and their negative polarity earthlings would cause me to endure. It was about 5 years after my flying experience when these little demons let me know they were also aware of me. No joke, about 5 or 6 years later, I, for very good reasons, walked out on my wife. About a year prior to the following incident, I was staying with a coworker in his apartment. I had lost my apartment previously to moving in with him, for some of those obvious events in my life. His name was Mike, and he was what some might call a skinhead. Not really. But he had perhaps one of the most vulgar mouths you would ever hear in public. Children, old ladies, your mother, your father, in restaurants, movies, it didn't matter. I had to sleep on his couch, and this meant I could only sleep after he and his friends were finally done with the living room. At any hour of the night. It was around midday as I was laying on my back and glad to finally be stretching out, fully awake and aware of where I was. All of a sudden I was being dragged over a counter by these, what I can only call little demons. Short little creatures, which took many of them to drag me over the countertop. Okay, now, I've had out-of-body experiences, dreams, and even some nightmares, but nothing like this. I was feeling actual pain as they scratched and clawed and even bit at my hands and arms. The pain is what was so real. I had never felt pain such as this in my astral or spirit body. After shaking myself back to my physical body, I inspected my hands and arms and was just so glad they didn't leave any marks. Little did I know back then that this was just a warning. A warning in the sense that my future life in Fort Lauderdale was going to be like my new friends and associates were about to chew me up and spit me out, just waiting for the whole system to come down around us. Guys on Duty, Europe. This work is dedicated to the guys on duty, the God of my understanding. I am so very grateful to what some may call interdimensional beings, spirit guides and muses, those who have passed on, angels, the Holy Spirit or whomever they may be, and knowing for certain they are not of the negative polarity. These beings live in the astral and celestial spheres of the many realms of which God consists of and has created. Knowing my conscious contact with God begins with all those of other realms whom eventually report to my Lord Jesus Christ, they having helped direct my actions through split-second divine timing, causing incidents to occur which have resulted in evidence of synchronicity in my life which could have never come about without their attention being paid to me. To you, the guys on duty, I write so we may share the eternal with this bridge between us as you guide me with the Father's divine love to share with those who continue to listen, so they may open conscious contact with you as well. To you, Rita, a witness of the following event, I am not, nor will I play the role of a Bible thumper, but I have been known to be a Bible stabber in the past. A number of times in the past I have demonstrated the power of the Bible in my Twilight Zone reality by stabbing a Bible and searching for the page and words at which the tip of the knife last penetrated a page. I would have whomever I was demonstrating to find that spot in the Bible by holding up the pages to the light and let them decide as to which side of the page they wanted me to read from, front or back. These words always fit the circumstances surrounding us at that moment. One of the most incredible times was when Rita, a 52-year-old home-bound woman I was living with, found the spot and it read, "A hole in horses." I was quite taken by the fact that the last page at which the knife blade made a hole, the words, "hole in horses," did appear. Not to mention the look on Rita's face as she pointed to the horses on the television, which I was unaware of. She was watching Bonanza. Just to let you know, the very last time I stabbed a Bible, which was many years ago, it read, "Stop raiding Israel," as it states in 2 Corinthians, chapter 12, verse 6, even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool, because I would be speaking the truth. But I refrain, so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say. The incidents of life in my Twilight Zone, which I will relate to you, are so incredible and unimaginable that there is no reason to fabricate or exaggerate any of the details. In short, simple words, I know how magical and wonderful this little world God created is, and I will only speak the truth. The zone I speak of is an acceptance of a spiritual awareness of the magical world, not of the occult variety, which God has created for mankind. Just try to imagine the zone in which the apostles and saints must have lived in. Perhaps now you know that mine is a spiritually enlightened reality, which can only be sanctioned by God. Fear of turning people off with my little signs from God and a few Bible passages is now non-existent in my world, because I believe if you have listened this far, there is a good chance we may have an opportunity to share a moment in the eternal. Occurrences were happening so frequently and so non-stop, goosebumps just weren't appearing. At times it did get so intense I would have to turn off the radio, because I did have to keep my feet on the ground and function in the real world. Countless and endless more incidents occurred, too numerous to relay as well as remember, but I would like to convey. They happened in a flow, moment after moment, hour after hour, and day after day. Evidence that my world is not full of just what you might call coincidences cannot be denied, but I'll let you decide for yourself. I will only state one last time, this is the God's honest truth of what has taken place in my life. In the real world, entering in the past has been as simple as requesting to do so. One example of this world's reality was, I placed my hands on the shower wall in front of me, palms flat and fingers spread wide as if to place them on a hand scanner for clearance to enter a secured facility, and asked God for another chance to enter. After drying myself off, I went to the kitchen counter to turn my small boombox around. Since it had been facing towards the dining room, I wanted to hear it better in the bedroom. I hit the power button only to hear the words, "Turn the beat around." Having realized how easy it was to step through that doorway really did surprise me. I wanted to confirm if this was true or not. After dressing, I placed the radio on the kitchen table and changed the station. The DJ said, "That was 9 Inch Nails." I cut the cards that were on the table in front of me, damn well knowing that it would be a 9, and it was. I hit a preset button to hear the words T for 2, cutting the cards again and knowing it would be a 2, and it was. Also having 4 dice from a backgammon set within reach, I rolled them, and 3 times the same 4 numbers came up. So I rolled them a 4th time and the same 4 numbers appeared. I then thought, don't roll them again, you're pushing your luck, but without hesitation, I rolled them a 5th time and they did in fact land on the same 4 numbers. Passage granted and confirmed. I could at will bring people into my reality if I wished to, as long as I was aware of evidence that I myself was ahead of the flow. I call it phasing for lack of a better word. Okay, now there is also the opportunity for phasing to warp into what I call tranactual. It's when the reflection of the previous event is realized, causing you to relate it to someone as at that moment the previous 2 events led to a third, even more inexplicable. One particular gentleman threatened me with bodily harm if I didn't stop what I was doing. I mentioned a song and it came on the radio, so he turned off the radio and turned on the television. So I went out for some cigarettes. When I got back, I then told him I had seen a pizza box lying upside down in the road and a dog sniffing around the box. So I kicked the box over so the dog might have a chance to lick what might be inside. Well, much to both of our surprise, there was an entire pizza in the box, so the dog went to town. I could see by my friend's reaction that it was not what I had expected to this cute little story. He replied, "I told you to stop it." He was now pointing to the television and the pizza commercial, in which the dog is attacking the pizza delivery man. I could tell that the best thing for me to do is sit and not say or do anything until we slipped out of the flow. Most detailed and intricate event occurred while finding myself incarcerated once again, but in this instance, it did not end with the reality that I had gone a little too far and lost touch with the real world. Unexpectedly being jailed did not mean an exit through the doorway. Realizing that God had placed me in this circumstance for a reason, I felt it necessary to share my experiences with others. Reading was a great way to pass the time. As I read aloud a particularly interesting sentence in the book I was reading, my bunkmate exclaimed that it was a fitting reply to what he had just read. Without hesitation or a plan, we went to the common area outside of our cell and proceeded to grab a handful of books each and sit at one of the steel tables. Each taking turns, we would place a finger within the pages and read aloud what it said. Consistently, time after time, what we were reading to each other sounded as if we were having a conversation. Sometimes it was a question with an appropriate answer, others were the continuation of a thought. We did this for several minutes, both of us completely amazed at how incredibly intricate and detailed one another's replies had become. Then I read the words, "God sent us a cuckoo as a sign of his sanctioning our actions." At that very moment on the television, a cartoon cuckoo popped out of its clock and announced to us it was there. We both cracked up laughing uncontrollably. As I was trying to catch my breath, I had to know what book this sentence came from. The book was about a pair of missionaries traveling down the Amazon. As I wanted to read further as to the circumstances for such a statement, a guard called me over to explain why we were laughing. I explained just what we had been doing, and when I read the statement again, the cuckoo once again was right on cue. As he was laughing, I decided to see if he too could have followed us through the doorway. I asked him to pick up any 2 books of about 20 which were in a row placed on the floor against the wall. Having chosen 2 books, I told him to place a finger within the pages of the first book and read it. As he found the page and pointed to words, I said, "Look and see what they say." To our amazement, he pointed at the words, "Look and see." Now, being totally confident that a second demonstration could not fail, I told him to do it again with the second book. The words he was now pointing at read, "Open your eyes and see." All he could say was, "You've certainly opened my eyes. He asked me who I was and what was I doing there. I told him of the circumstances which landed me there and told him of who I thought I might be, as well as my run-in with Phil Collins and my universal language. His reply was completely unexpected, as he told me that his father had taught him my universal language when he was a kid. Not that he remembered it, but his father had in fact spent time talking about exactly the same code. He then said he had to leave and do his job elsewhere. This started me thinking about just how many people I had told my story to. What were the chances that I had actually met his father in the few dozen years I had been on this path? It seemed, in my world, the odds were greatly in my favor. This one event truly strengthened my resolve to continue on the path God had chosen for me, regardless of any consequences my actions in the real world might have for me. Later that day I walked up to the door which faced the observation booth and banged on it to get the guard's attention. Without hesitation, this same guard pulled the microphone to his mouth and said, "Yes, Messiah." There was no sarcasm in his voice, and this only angered me. I yelled back, "Don't call me that.